It was a warm day when Jon's world ended. He stood watch in front of Sansa's chambers as usual. Everything was calm, and the corridors were empty as he'd expected. Sansa had gone for her normal morning walk with her septa around the courtyard. A moment later, he heard footsteps rushed but light, quick, and fleet. Sansa turned the corner and almost rammed into him. Her face was flushed a deep red, her hair sticking to her temples and scalp with sweat. But underneath the flush, her skin was pale, and her eyes were over-wide and fearful. "Sansa," he began. She interrupted him, speaking rapidly through her heaving breaths. "Oh, Jon, it's everything, take." A pause, and she breathed deep through her nose before spitting out words as fast as she could. "Listen to me, Jon. Go. Everything's changed. Everything has, oh, damn it." She turned away and then back, and he saw that the pallor across her skin was as much fear as it was a caged, terrifying need to do something. "You have to go," she said and stepped forward, so close that he could smell the faint lavender scent she used. His heart started to pound hard as well. "You have to leave. Find Arya, take Nymeria and Ghost, and a lady take them, find a horse, go. Go to Winterfell, and don't you dare turn back." What?" Jon asked sharply. "What the fuck, Sansa?" "You're going. I can't. Father, someone has to stay. There's no time. Find Arya, Jon, keep her safe, and go home. Tell." Sansa's hands tightened on his, nails digging scarlet half-moons into the backs of his palms. "Tell Robb I love him, and that I trust him to do what's best. Tell Bran I want him to have adventures. Tell Rickon that I'm sorry I didn't see him grow. Tell Mother I miss her, okay? I love her, and I miss her. Please, Jon, just remember that I will always, always love you. If I don't make it." He choked. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm your sworn shield. What's going on?" "You're not dying for me," she shrilled. "I couldn't bear it." "You're leaving, right now, with Arya and the direwolves." Slowly, Sansa inhaled and exhaled, regaining some composure. "You're going. Please, I beg you, go home." Jon looked at her, long and steady, and slowly nodded. Something seemed to crack away in her expression when he did. Relief? Worry? Grief? And then she suddenly leapt forwards, arms wrapping tight around him and clutching him. "Stay alive," she ordered, and Jon remembered Robb's demand the night before they left Winterfell, could see the things that made Robb and Sansa's siblings, all the warmth and love and vicious, unflagging desire to protect that made them who they were. That he loved and hated them in equal measure. "I swear it," he said, and pressed a firm kiss to her hair. "Now, you promise me, you survive too!" "Don't let them break you." Sansa pulled back. For a moment, steel flashed across her eyes, and he could almost see the wolf inside her, the blue-eyed killer, the ice-veined princess who survived what nobody else could have. "They won't." It was a promise. It was a vow. It was as close as she could get to one. Jon pressed his forehead to the juncture of her neck and shoulder, and then pulled away. "Chin up," he ordered, and saw the way her tears and grief passed behind a mask as coldly beautiful as any sword. Survive, he thought, and knew it not to be an order or a wish but a prayer to everyone and everything and anyone and anything listening. Let her survive, I beg of you. Let Sansa survive. They threw Sansa's father into the black cells. Sansa swallowed her bile and her grief, her fear and her rage. She draped herself in Southron silks, doing the laces up without a maid. She'd gotten used to it in the Arya and then in the north. There had been many days when she hadn't had anyone to serve her in King's Landing as well, so it seemed like a strange sort of remembrance to do it over again, this small, quiet form of independence. Cersei told her to write a letter to Robb. I cannot, she began, only to see the cold, snake-like disdain in Cersei's eyes. Last time, there had been jealousy there. There had been rage and hate, and Sansa had managed to weather it through chance and luck. Now she'd hidden behind shields of fear and useless frippery. She hadn't expressed opinions or desires for months, had curled away and let old revulsion and fear well up in the place of stiff masks. In this world, Cersei Lannister did not fear Sansa Stark. In this world, all Cersei saw when she saw Sansa was the meek, retiring daughter of Ned Stark. There was no hatred there now, only contempt and harsh dismissal. "You will regret that," Sansa promised, and reached for a quill. A day later, or a week later, time seemed to have lost meaning here. She wrapped herself up in the brightest silks she had. Sansa powdered her face heavily enough that they wouldn't be able to see the dark shadows under her eyes. She hadn't slept in ages, and it showed in the pale arcs of her cheekbones, the hollows around her collarbone. They mustn't suspect that she knew anything. The Lannisters must not ever even think of her as anything more than a shy, retiring girl. She could not afford for them to see the steel underneath her silks, and so she powdered her face and her arms and let that be another in a long line of masks. In the months she'd spent in King's Landing, Sansa had avoided the Iron Throne almost entirely. Free said she had no desire to be in the same room where she'd been beaten, where Joffrey had shamed her and terrified her, but now she had no choice. And she was smarter now. She was harder and colder. Sansa knew not to ask for things that wouldn't give concrete results. She knew not to ask for open-ended things, mercy, leniency, kindness. No, she knew what to say, and perhaps more importantly, she knew how to say it. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she felt something dig deep inside of her, firm against her fears. Slowly, she entered the throne room. Joffrey reclined on his throne, and Cersei stood beside him, pale hair, twisted mirrors of each other. Sansa felt her hands twitch, her cheeks pale, but she did not allow herself to falter. In front of the entire court, she swept into a curtsy that she knew was flawless. "My king," she began, voice high and tremulous, "I come here to beg of you for mercy." "For who?" "Your father?" Cersei asked contemptuously, before anyone else could speak. "For the man who proclaimed my son unfit for the throne? There is no room for mercy in our hearts for traitors, Lady Sansa." "I do not know what he did, Your Grace." Sansa bowed her head. Let the court see her trembling shoulders and curved posture. Let them all see that she was just a girl, nothing to fear. "I know not his crimes, but he is my father. And I do not know what he said to you, only that he was ill, that his leg still pains him." She swallowed hard and lifted her head to meet Joffrey's sickly blue eyes. "I beg for mercy, Your Grace. Please allow a maester to see to his leg. Allow him to rest in the rooms under guard, if that is your desire. But I only wish that he would not die while being held prisoner." "Your father is a traitor." It was Varys who stepped forward, and though she'd never thought to see kindness in his features, she thought there was pity in his eyes. "But still the head of House Stark," he commented. "He is still at the head of a great house. We treat such lords with lenience. We do not offer small folk." "Please," Sansa said. "Please, Your Grace, I beg of you." "Oh, very well." Joffrey waved his hand dismissively. "Take him from the cells." "But," and here his face grew hard and cruel, Sansa's heart skipped a beat. "We do not offer the services of maesters to traitors. If you wish someone to attend him, it will be yourself." When Cersei turned on him angrily, he didn't even spare her a look. "Of course, you'll be under guard." "Thank you," Sansa managed. She let tears pool in her eyes, and then she stepped back, let the people step forward, and shielded herself from Joffrey's view. Back in her rooms, she let herself weep into her hands. Relief and another, sharper fear were flooding her veins, and she didn't know what to do next. All she wanted was to sleep, was to run with Jon and Arya, but that was impossible. They were gone and were halfway to Winterfell, probably. She had nobody here to protect her, only someone to protect. Her father was injured. It had been her only reason for staying, to shield him and save him. But what could a single girl do against a king? Against a woman as vicious as a snake and twice as cruel? We will endure, Sansa thought, and it was desperate. It was desolate. We will endure, as we always have. When Sansa saw her father, she cried out in both pain and shock. His leg had, indeed, been injured badly, and she could now see the swelling that she'd never noticed before. The Lannister guards had made him walk on his own 2 feet from the cells, and it must have pained him greatly, for he wasn't even limping any longer, only shuffling agonizingly slowly. Sansa ran forwards through the guards, ignoring them, and drew his arm over her shoulder, letting him lean some of his weight on her. He gasped in relief, and she felt her chest ache with a sharp, sudden pain at it. "Sansa," he said lowly, "Sansa, what have you done? What did you do?" And she knew that she was crying, "Oh gods!" soundless, steady rivulets down her face. She opened her mouth to answer, but caught Cersei's eyes across the hallway, staring at them both with revulsion and disdain. If she said something, if she spilled anything, who knew what the consequences would be? Sansa would not let her father be taken from her. Not again. "Let's get to your rooms," she told him through the tears. "Come on, father, only another couple of steps. There's not even any stairs, you know." She kept up a steady litany of encouragements the whole rest of the way, instead of any assurances, instead of any information. The Lannisters had found some measure of kindness in them to offer a room that was, while not next to Sansa's own, somewhat near. She had spent a full afternoon fixing it up with curtains and airing it out to make it more amenable as a sick room. The Lannister guards, however, were unwilling to allow them to stay inside together. One of them stood inside while the others left. Sansa refused to show how uncomfortable it made her to have someone watching while she tended to her father. An hour later, after she'd washed his knee and calf as well as she could, she found that it could indeed become worse. No normal Lannister guard watched over them, but the dead-eyed island pain. She shivered and then decided that she wouldn't let herself be afraid of the dumb brute. Her father needed her reassurance more than she needed to be completely silent in the presence of Lannisters. "You ought to have taken better care," she reproached him gently, wrapping bandages over his calf. "It's going to take a long time to get better, especially if you put more weight on it." Her father looked at her and then dipped away. There was something so sad in his eyes, something she could not address while the guard was there. Sansa tied off the bandages and rose to her feet. "I'm sorry," she was going to say, but thought better of it. Instead, she injected bright warmth into her voice and said, "You'll be better soon, father." Another week passed. Sansa fixed his bandages, applied special oils. She kept her head down and voice quiet. Some days, she sang or read aloud. The guards were always attentive, at first, but when she only sang of Jonquil and Florian and old dead heroes, they appeared to get bored and irritable. Her father didn't speak. 4 hours on end, it seemed, 4 days. He responded to her questions with short answers, and always looked so grief-stricken that she found herself impatient, irritable, and compassionate by turns. Finally, one day he caught her hands when she went to smear rosemary oil over his leg. It didn't achieve anything, really, but it was cheap to get and gave her an excuse to enter the sick room once more, and he asked hoarsely, "Arya? Jon?" The guard stirred. Sansa didn't give any indication of having heard him, turning away to wash the rag cloth in the oil once more. Her father dropped her hands and slumped back against his pillows, and how it ached to see him retreating behind masks and walls once more. Sansa settled back against the chair when everything was finished, and she began to sing an old northern lullaby, a scrap of melody that old Nan enjoyed and hummed whenever she was in the mood. "We cannot be found," it began, "in the place of darkness. Let the skies come crumbling, we are safe." Ned Stark turned to look at her, and she saw the hope flare in his eyes. Sansa could not say it more clearly, could not answer without cutting herself off from him, but she could give him what hope she had. Slowly, Sansa inclined her head, answering his unspoken question. He gave a great shudder and slumped against his pillows. Tension and mourning seeped out of his posture until he looked almost boneless. "Oh, father," thought Sansa, and brushed a hand to his elbow before standing. "I'll see you after dinner," she told him. "Mayhaps we can start walking soon." Jon was many things. He was a brother, a son, a bastard. He was a dutiful man, and a kind one at that. These were things that he had been born to, things that he had no choice in. Of all the things he was, of all the choices he had ever made, of all the ways he had created himself, the biggest was becoming a sworn shield. "I will stay beside you," he'd said, and now he was in the Riverlands and Sansa was in King's Landing still. Arya and he were making good time. In another week, they'd crossed the border between the Riverlands and the North. Jon was glad that she was safe, was so glad that Arya was under his protection, but he could only remember the flame-haired girl he left behind in a viper's nest. When they crossed the twins, Jon made his decision. That night he knelt in front of Arya and gripped her thin, bony wrist in his own. "We'll reach the northern border soon," he told her quietly. They'd camped closer than usual to the castle, and if they weren't quiet would be found out soon. "You're going to take Nymeria and Lady, Arya, and you're going to go home. You remember how to get back to Winterfell, right?" Arya's silences had grown longer and longer on the road. The first night, when he dragged her out of the Red Keep and they'd raced away, she had wept and screamed. Now, almost a month later, she had become as quiet and shadowed as a ghost. "And where will you be?" "I have to go back." Jon paused. "Father's still there, and so's Sansa." "Go with Robb," Arya said. She didn't look up to meet his eyes. Instead, she twirled Needle around her wrist gently. "Come back to Winterfell. We can return with an army. We can avenge Jory and all the others they've killed. First, we get them safe. First, we get Father and Sansa out, and then we make them bleed. But only after all of us are safe, you understand? I have to save them. I'm the only one who will, you know that. I'm the only one who can." "Jon," Arya said, and there was anger in her eyes, there was betrayal, but more than anything, there was fear. "You'll make it home," said Jon. "You'll be safe. Lady and Nymeria will protect you." "What can Lady do?" Arya asked derisively. "Choke someone with her ribbons? Blind someone with her shiny fur?" He remembered bruises wringing his throat for a full fortnight, and how hard it had been to hide the evidence of Lady's viciousness from everyone, even with Robb and Sansa helping him. Jon's lips twitched. "You'd be surprised. Now, keep your chin up, Arya, and Needle beside you. There should be enough food for the rest of the journey, so no need to go into towns. And be safe. I'll see you soon, I promise." She was young. It was so easy to forget that, but it was there in the way her shoulders slumped, and she struggled to maintain a blank facade. It was so easy to forget that, but Arya had never liked coddling, so all Jon did was ruffle her hair and keep his eyes steady on hers. "You can't promise that," she whispered, after they'd beaten down the fire and curled up to sleep. Jon thought he might laugh, or that he might cry. He'd sworn so many promises, the question was no longer how to keep them all. No, now it was which ones to keep. "I'll try my best," he said, and Arya's nails dug into the flesh of his wrist for a heartbeat before she turned away. It wasn't enough, his word. It never had been, and never would be. But it was what he had. If it wasn't enough, Jon would make it enough. It was what he'd done all his life, right? "If you can manage your leg like that tomorrow, we can try actually walking," Sansa told her father. It was late evening, almost night. Sansa's chest felt like it was full of sharp, splintered ice. Cersei had been telling her to send sharper and sharper letters to Robb, urging him to come to King's Landing and swear allegiance. They would wait, Cersei told her, for the Northerners to come down and then have the trial for Ned Stark. But with 10 letters sent and no proper response from Robb, Cersei was getting impatient. Joffrey had all but forgotten about them, to all appearances, but Cersei knew and feared Ned for good reason. Another week, she told Sansa, just before she could go to change her father's bandages. Another week with no response, and we'll have the trial with or without your fur-laden brother to view. She couldn't communicate this to her father. Sansa had to keep up appearances, had to keep a firm mask and unflagging faith. She would survive this. Her father would survive this. They had to. "Sleep well, father," she said and stepped away, pulling her shoulders tight instead of shivering at the bloody gleam of Island Payne's armor. In the hallways, back to her rooms, she moved quietly, quickly. Inside her chambers, she just lit a candle to light the darkened room when she felt a hand steal over her mouth, another clamp over her wrist. Sansa panicked and let her elbow bend with the attacker's move, accelerating enough to slam against his breastbone. When he bent over, choking, she twisted out of his reach and drew the dagger hidden in her shoes. She held it lightly and waited for him to reveal his position. But instead of a blind swipe or growl, the attacker lit a match. The flame revealed a painfully familiar face. "Jon?" she breathed. He offered her a faint smile, and she dropped the dagger, stepped forward and hugged him, tight enough to make him grunt. "What are you doing here?" "Saving you." He grinned once, silver quick and just as soft. "Come on! If we hurry, we can." "How did you even come here?" "What? I told you to." "Oh, gods, Arya!" Sansa felt horror flood her veins. "Where is she? How is she? Why aren't you with her?" "Jon." "She's fine." Jon nodded to the dagger on the carpet. "You aren't. I came back. I told you to save her. And I'm sworn to protect you." Sansa reeled back and slumped over the couch. After a moment, she gathered her wits enough to say, "If it were just me, we might be able to do it. But father, his leg's still injured. We can't go fast enough." Jon lit a candle on the table nearby and then seated himself next to her. He shifted, so she had no choice but to look him in the eye. "Don't worry about that," Jon replied. "But if you can figure out a way to get him out of the room he's in, I'd be interested." "Aye." She flinched inwards and then hated herself for that bit of weakness. "It has to be me." "I have to do it," she said softly. Jon frowned and Sansa pressed a cold hand to his. "You can't. They'll be wary of a strange man entering father's chambers. But I've been going in and out at all times. They won't think anything of it." His frown deepened. "I don't like it." Sansa breathed deep and let go of the acrid taste of helplessness. "You don't have to," she said archly. It felt good to have someone with whom she need not temper her tongue, someone who took her sharp words with both humor and seriousness as needed. "I'm not just sitting here while you go and get father," Jon said lowly. Sansa tilted her head slowly, thoughts whirling, and then it came to her. The perfect answer. "Island Payne's guarding father's sick room? And he has ice? Did you know that? The Lannisters have ice, that's what I knew, but the sword's actually in his chambers." She leaned forward to capture his eyes. "And he's not in them." "You want me to get ice while you save father?" "Yes." She hesitated. I'll need to take your sword, the one that you have right now. And there'll be 3 of us on the road. It's best if we have at least 2 swords, right? And ice is Valyrian steel light enough that it won't." "I don't like this," Jon repeated, cutting off her babble. "Can you do it? Take father out of his rooms, lead him to the dungeons? It isn't a short walk." "We'll disguise ourselves. And yes, I I can do this. They won't ever expect it. Father can do it. Don't worry about that. They won't ever expect you to punch them. He grinned again and rubbed his breastbone. I'm going to have a bruise, Sansa. You don't pull your punches. I don't know when people accost me in empty bedchambers, Sansa retorted, and then blushed bright red at the humor in Jon's eyes. Not that way, she told him. Jon only grinned wider, and she rolled her eyes. Don't be ridiculous, you idiot. Tell me more about all these people accosting you in your bedchambers, he teased. How many men do I have to strangle before we leave? Thankfully, none. We have to leave quietly, remember? After a moment, the laughter faded from his eyes. Jon nodded and rose abruptly. All right. Here's where you go. You know where the kitchens are? And the second courtyard, yeah? There's this gate, kind of shadowed. Just keep walking, and you can leave the castle entirely. How did you find out about this? Arya. It was all the explanation needed. She was exploring and found this. When I said I was coming back, she told me to take you out this way. Sansa turned her hands over and over in her lap. The dim light made her skin look cold, look dead. The nails glittered like cold steel. When she looked up, Jon's face was soft and warm, sadness in the shadowy curve of his lip, and somehow, through some miracle, faith in the unbroken line of his brows. Chin up, she murmured, and Jon grinned, wolfish and deadly. Ned felt exhausted. He could barely sleep. In point of fact, he hadn't slept for a full night in weeks. Sansa had been taking care of him, better than expected, in all honesty, but she was only a girl in a nest of snakes. He could see the fear, well worn behind a mask of courtesy. Ned was many things, but he had always loved his children more than anything in the world. To see his lovely, beautiful daughter so afraid, and so afraid of showing that fear, made guilt bubble in his belly like a pot full of boiling water. Perhaps worse than that was his behavior those first few days. Ned had Sansa right in front of him, but Arya never came to visit, and he was sure that no Lannister guard would have been enough to keep her from him if she were there, which meant she was either not in King's Landing or dead. He was sure that she was dead. That Jon was dead as well, because there was no other reason for Sansa to have such fear in her eyes, no reason for her to cringe at Island Payne's red armor, no other reason for her to be so quiet on the subject of her own family. When he finally got the courage to ask, however, Sansa sang a song that was titled Safe. She dipped her head away, and then he saw the stark, naked hope in her Catelyn blue eyes. Suddenly, Ned realized why she was so frightened. She knew they were fled, and for both to have left without anyone realizing, someone had to have warned them. Oh, my poor, brave, darling daughter. Oh, I'm so sorry. I should have looked after your protection. I should have saved you. The only other question now was why Sansa had stayed. Ned thought he knew the answer, but couldn't allow himself to think it. If the only reason she had stayed was for him, Ned thought he might die from the shame. It was past midnight when Sansa entered his room again. She looked paler, he thought, but that could have just been the lighting. Ilyn Payne straightened stiffly when she closed the door. I'm sorry, Father, she said, looking apologetic. I didn't mean to disturb you. I forgot to put the thicker bandages on your leg. It's better if I finish it tonight so tomorrow we can go over walking, yes? He nodded wordlessly. Sansa moved closer and began to unravel the bandages quickly. Her hands, Ned saw, were trembling very faintly, and she didn't sit as she usually did. But she didn't look up at him, or give him any other indication that there was anything abnormal happening. The thicker bandages she'd spoken of were wrapped tightly around his knee and kept tight enough to make him gasp slightly. It was stiffer than necessary, he thought. Slowly, Sansa rose to her feet. Ned saw her hands tighten, knuckles white against her already pale skin, and then she sent him a faint smile. I love you, she mouthed and turned away. Sansa felt her heart thrumming, Too fast for her to calm, too fast for her to hide the red blush in her cheeks. In Winterfell, what felt like decades previous, Jon had taught her to keep her head calm. He had taught her where to stab a man, how to defend herself, when to attack, and when to defend. But it was Robb after who had lifted her chin to meet his gaze and said lowly, "If it ever happens that you must kill someone, Sansa, there is one thing to know. Don't hesitate. Hesitate to plan. Hesitate to think about it. But once you've made the decision, move with all the speed and all the strength you have, and do not pause until it is over. Until they are dead or close enough." Sansa breathed deep, reached for the hilt of her borrowed sword, and struck. What happened next, Ned did not see. He heard Sansa stumble slightly, a common enough occurrence, particularly when it was this late. He closed his eyes and leaned against the headboard, trying to find a comfortable position. A heartbeat later, someone gasped, and there was a bitten-off cry. Ned stiffened reflexively and flinched upright, and gaped at the sight of his eldest daughter sticking a sword into Eileen Payne's jugular. He must have struck her. There was already a red handprint across Sansa's cheekbone. But she kept her head facing the dying man, and stepped closer instead of cringing away, to ensure that when he fell she could catch him, likely so that his body didn't make that much noise and draw attention to them. It must have been painful to support the full weight of a man almost a half-foot taller and wearing steel-plate armor, but Sansa didn't give much indication of the pain. "Sansa," Ned hissed, "what have you done?" She grunted and slowly lowered him to the ground. Blood had spattered over her face and the neckline of her gown. When she straightened, she looked both afraid and wary of him, Ned realized, with another pang of guilt. I didn't want to, Father," she said. "I'm sorry, but I went to my rooms and Jon was there." "Jon?" "Yes, he gave me his sword." Sansa wrung her hands, looking young and vulnerable. "There's a very long story, and I know you'll want to hear all of it, but we have to leave first." "I can't walk," Ned pointed out. A smile stole across her lips, making her look like Catelyn at her most happy, something bright and fierce and sly. Something sharper than Catelyn, actually something that was delighted and triumphant and glorious in its beauty. "Try," she told him. Ned frowned, and then slowly swung his legs over the side of the bed. Hands catching at the bedpost, he levered himself up, leaning most of his weight on his uninjured leg. "Take a step farther," Sansa said, stepping closer, close enough that she could catch him if he fell. When he did, cringing at the memory of pain, there was nothing. Nothing beyond a twinge of discomfort, easily ignored. Ned's head snapped up to see her, and she smiled, full and happy and bright. "You lied?" he asked. "No. I was worried. That was true." She hesitated. "But it wasn't so bad as I pretended. If Jon had come after another week, you might even have been fully healed." Ned gaped again. When had Sansa learned such methods of manipulation? His sweet, beautiful girl who... Well, Sansa was the girl who hadn't left her rooms in King's Landing in ages. She avoided Lannisters with grace, but avoided them nevertheless. She had changed after that one horrible night in Winterfell, but both he and Catelyn had assumed it to be natural effects of growing. Ned had focused on Arya's louder rebellions. He trusted Jon to keep Sansa safe. Maybe that had been a mistake. "Now come on," she told him. "We have to hurry." She bent over Eileen Payne's corpse and stripped him of his red cloak. Ned balked when she approached him. Sansa wanted him to wear a dead man's cloak, but all she did was sigh impatiently and thrust it at him. "We have to hurry. If we're caught, the consequences will be terrible. And I'd much rather have freedom, Father, won't you?" Faced with bright eyes and a sharp tongue, all Ned could do was take the damn cloak and, awkwardly, pin it around his neck. Payne was a big man, taller than Ned by a fair margin. His cloak was embarrassingly long on Ned. Sansa tutted when she saw it, but didn't say anything else. She was busy packing some bottles into a cloth bag, and then drawing a dark cloak over her own dark hair. "Come on," she said, and led him outside the room for the first time in months. My thoughts as a reader. It is a strange thing to watch the children of Winterfell step so willingly into the jaws of the lion. Sansa wears her silks like armor, and Jon makes oaths he cannot possibly keep. Between them lies Ned, broken in body and heavy with guilt, while Arya drifts further into shadow. Courage in such halls is never enough. It may grant a moment's reprieve, a single breath of hope in a world built to choke it. But hope, like all fragile things, cuts as keenly as Valyrian steel. I wonder, as any reader must, is this the birth of a wolf who has learned to bare her teeth? Or merely another song of sorrow whispered before the headsman's blade falls?